All right. So now we're going to get into some of the heart of what it took for you to become a musician. And I said during the intro, if you didn't recognize this, Keni and I spent some time together in the Army. I love this guy like a brother. And I'll never forget running around the airfield on Fort Benning, Georgia with him while he's singing Army cadence, but he's not singing the standard Army cadence. This guy's singing Johnny Be Good. And I'm like, who on earth can pull off Chuck Berry in Army cadence style? So Keni, I gotta tell you, tell the listeners, how does it go from Johnny Be Good cadence in the Army to singing with some of the biggest names in Nashville music? Kind of explain how this thing went from the Army to Nashville.
I wish I could have come up with a really great transition for you, Jeff, and say why I left the Army. Because that's my short answer on a radio interview is generally, well, I had put in my flight packet, I was going to go, I wanted to go to Rotary Wing School and fly helicopters. Because, you know, at the place that you and I were at, you really had two options. You could go to the dark side, you go over, or you could go fly helicopters for the dark side. And I came into the Army to fly to begin with, and I had to go on a waiting list, and that's why I ended up in the Rangers. And so I would have my flight packet in, and then the band just started doing really well. Yeah. And that was, you know, my heart and my headspace were not right around 97, you know, 3 years after you and I were in Mogadishu. And I realized that I was hanging around, in all honesty, I realized I was hanging around the Army just waiting to go back to combat. Because I just there was this weird void. And it had a lot to do with where my walk wasn't with God and where my headspace was at. But I'm like, the music was a fantastic transition for me because it enabled me to move straight to something I was passionate about and more. And I think the hundreds of hours of counseling that I've done to come to realize it is that when I went to music, Jeff, it was a safe place for me because I owned the stage. Like I can walk up on the stage, I own that time, and then I could sing my songs and say thank you. I could go do the meet and greets, and then I could disappear. But it was my choice as to how I interacted with people, and the stage was a comfortable place for me. Yeah. And it was that worked for a little while, but that's how I made the transition. It was enough to get me motivated and started making that drive from Columbus to Nashville like twice or three times a week just to write with people. Yeah. And that was kind of the end. You start writing good songs with really good songwriters, and then they, like Billy Montana, you guys have met him, and Billy was one of the first people I wrote with. And then they start introducing you to folks, and then they start sending you around, and all of a sudden you're sitting there at Cracker Barrel one day in Nashville, and the Brent and Diana, who own a publishing company, we want to give you a publishing deal. And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, we want you to write songs for us, and we're going to pay you to do it. Wow, sold. Wow, where do I sign? Yeah. You know, it's like it was just a great transition for me. Yeah.
Well, you had to have had some goals when you started making the drive up to Nashville. What were they? Do you remember?
I do. It was basically to not suck. And that's my advice to people. The doors are good. The opportunities are going to open for you. They will. People always say, when was your big break? Well, it's a series of big breaks. It's a series of dots that God lines up, and you bounce from dot to dot, dot. But those doors won't open if you don't bring your A game. Right. And because it's important. And my goal was to prove to myself that I had what it takes to play in that arena and to play in that league. And I did, and I do, I still do it. And it's, that's just always been my goal, was to write songs that were worthy of that level of pro.
Yeah.